Running down the weathered trail in the faint early morning mist, the little girl glimpsed a building in the distance. As the girl neared the building, hidden in this woodland, she heard sounds coming from inside. She saw that the large building was, in fact, a barn, painted white. Above the broad doors was a painted cross, the only evidence that this was anything more than a painted barn. One of the wide front doors stood slightly ajar, and she slipped inside. Inside, a mixture of smells assaulted her senses. Her eyes squinted almost immediately to see in the dim interior. The small shaft of light from the open door did little to light the vast, windowless space. A fire, dancing in the smoky enclosure, made her eyes, which were now slits, sting with salty tears. Through this haze of smoke and din, she caught sight of a man lying on a cot, his features distorted in pain. A shriveled, thin man sat next to him, hunched over his legs. Her eyebrows rose in incredibility as she began to understand what the thin man was doing to the one on the cot. The frail, sickly-looking man was slicing the skin off of one of the legs of the man, not just lying down, she realized, but strapped down. Smiling, the sordid torturer finished with his flaying knife. As he sat it down next to him, he licked his lips. Flicked, really, almost like a snake flicks its tongue, tasting the air. Never taking his eyes off the cuts he had made in the disabled man, he delicately touched the tip of the sliced flesh. He made quick, jerking motions, and it suddenly dawned on the frightened little girl that he was, in fact, peeling the skin off this man. She then noticed the deep red, glossy patches all over the strapped man's torso, not only on his chest and legs, but also on his sides and arms. The smoke and mere smell of the place began to make the girl choke. She stifled a cough and dropped to her knees. Thinking she was turning to safety, she got on all fours and began to crawl backwards away from the frightful scene. Turning, she saw what adorned the opposite side of the church/barn. Spikes jutted out of the wall, some as thick as her wrist, some as thin as a pencil. All were covered in blood. Dried blood hung in rivulets on a few, only a foot or two away from her face. Scared to look above her current line of sight, she squeezed her eyes, sending a few straggling tears down her already tear-stained cheeks. Pulling her body back, she sat on her haunches, slowly raising her neck, then head with conscious effort. She opened her eyes, hoping the rest of the wall was empty. It wasn't. Suspended, maybe 10 feet in the air, was a priest. His body was slightly askew, as if some giant child threw him up there. Some spikes went completely through his body. Some had only partially pierced through him, causing damp spots all over his dark robes. His white collar was stained deep red, almost brown. He was definitely dead, but she swore he moved. She sat there, frozen, staring at the priest, imagining him turning his head to her, pulling himself off the spiked wall. To her, only her constant gaze kept him fixed there, on his macabre perch. After a few minutes, she heard him start to scream. When the high-pitched screech pierced the thick, bloody air, she jumped up, fearing someone saw her, or worse, was coming after her. She knew that priest moved. She sprinted out the door. Running blindly, she darted into the woods. The screams followed her. She ran and ran, but the screaming never stopped. The young girl ran until she thought her heart would burst, but still the screaming never stopped. Lost, hearing only screams of agony and feeling only terror, she collapsed. It was then she realized it was her all along, screaming, crying out in agony, feeling the innocence stripped from her, leaving her raw and wounded, just like the man strapped to hell's gurney. I really hope that you like this one. This is something that I wrote a few years back called Hell's Gurney, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm still waiting on the okay for some Reddit stories so that I can share those with you. So in the meantime, I'm going to be sharing some of my own writing. If you liked what you heard, please press the like button and subscribe. There's plenty more coming, and I'm going to try to get 2 more stories up this week if possible. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.